fascinating and impossible for me to be such a strong woman and to find a man that will impossibly love you without making them feel insecure. Impossible. But both my grandmothers and my mother have done that. So I suppose the trinity of women in my life have been the most interesting. Is my grandmother, Veronica, my grandmother, Angelina, and my mother, Cynthia. They are my trinity of my womanhood. I suppose they're also the reason that I'm a feminist, but it's quite crazy, isn't it, that I'm a feminist, and yet what's so lovely about it is so many people have this misinterpretation of feminism as man-hating, which it isn't. It's got nothing to do with that. I really admire my grandmothers and my mom.
Fantastic. I think my mum's probably...
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
I could say someone that I've met recently, but to be completely honest, that I think an interesting person is someone that teaches you something about your life and how you can...
Your family teaches you more than anyone else.
And your family teaches you more than anybody.
Okay, our next question is by Racia Ventisik. I think that's your name. I'm really sorry about mispronouncing it dreadfully. I'm sure I did.
It is Racia.
And she's from California. Did you miss having a Lady Gaga in the 90s while you were a teenager to be a fan of and to identify with?
No, I guess I didn't, because I suppose I didn't know what a Lady Gaga was yet. I didn't know. I always knew it was my destiny to be an entertainer, but I didn't. I was ready to be the new thing. I always admired the women that I grew up watching, all the pop stars, Britney and Christina, and I was a big Layla K fan, and Madonna, and Blondie, and Patti Smith, and Linda Perry, and Four Non Blondes. And I could go on and on and on about so many, but I guess I'm speaking specifically about when I was in the 90s. I was in 1990. I was 4, so I'm speaking specifically about until I was about 15 years old, which would mean that I was in my younger years. And I listened around when I was 13. That's when I started to really listen to older music. So I was more into Zeppelin and Queen and Pink Floyd. So I wasn't really. I kind of went through a transition where which is very much, you can see now in my performance style, much more androgynous. I was much more obsessed with male rock stars at a certain point, and Bowie to be particular. So I didn't identify with women as much in the 90s, I guess you could say, also. So I was more obsessed with men and grunge. I loved Kurt Cobain. I mean, I loved so many different kinds of music, but a female figure, perhaps I was too young to know what could become, but now here we are.
Great. Okay. Our next question is from Stephen Gann in New York.
Stephen, oh, V Magazine is my favorite magazine in the history of magazines. And Stephen Gann, I may have said, if I hadn't said my mother and my 2 grandmothers, I may have said Stephen Gann, because Stephen Gann is one of the most interesting people I've ever met, and most lovely, wonderful, interesting people. He's amazing.
Well, Stephen asks, at the Met, Oprah Winfrey called you some kind of spiritual and cultural leader. How do you feel about that? And what do you do to uphold that? As in, do you think of yourself as a role model to younger people and kids?
Yes, I do. And I appreciate so much that Oprah said that. Oprah is wonderful and such a wonderful inspiration as well. And you know, things change. You know, like I said, didn't have very much perception of the way people viewed me up until a certain point. And then once you start to gauge who's watching and who's listening, you start to think about, okay, now what do I want to say now? Particularly with my next album, I'm much more self-aware of my spiritual and leadership connection to my little monsters and the world in the way that any artist is a leader in that way. And I don't particularly think that things like sex and drugs and talking about things openly in that way are wrong or necessarily bad for young kids. But I think that the most terrible thing that you can do is be prejudiced. And I would say that emphatically in my career, I am against prejudice. I am very against prejudice. I'm very against judging any particular kind of person or people or thing or idea. I think it is very important to be free and full of non-judgment. So I guess I would say that is how I religiously and spiritually lead my fans is in that way, and I'm okay with that responsibility. I wasn't always quite aware of it, and I'm aware that in my work sometimes I get a bit, you know, I don't think about it sometimes in my videos and in my music and in my lyrics because there's also
personal expression,
and also I have older fans and insecure and fans who need and want to hear how I really feel about things. So there's a balance. You've got to keep a balance. I can't only think about doing what's wrong. Doing what's wrong or right is so it's so religious. That is what religion is, isn't it? What is wrong and what is right. And I think religion is completely bogus. So I think, you know, in the most spiritual and religious kind of way that I am, I believe in God and I'm a very religious Catholic person, but religion is quite bogus, isn't it? Because no religion doesn't hate one kind of person. So it's very confusing for me. I still struggle with it.
There's kind of spirituality and there's religion, and it's how those two interrelate. And
now, I don't know if someone would be perhaps offended that I said religion is bogus and they don't want their 11-year-old to hear that statement, but I feel that I am a good opinion about what is taught to young people and how we are mind controlled by whatever forces that be to believe or see things in a certain way. And I think the most important thing that they need to learn is to love and to be non-prejudice.
I think that's good teaching.
So that's what I think. Mom, grandmas, if you're listening.
Our next question is a little bit, well, pulling away a little bit from that. It's by Javier Perez from Los Angeles. And Javier asks, what's the one thing even your best friends don't know about you until now?
Well, Javier, who is one of my best friends, that even my best friends don't know about me. Probably how much I really miss you. And how, I hope you know this, but I would not be where I am today without all of my wonderful and closest friends. So forgive me for being sappy, but just in case we needed to clarify.